Hey, how's it going? It's Joshua Roy here from Access World Seminars, and I've just attended the Tony Robbins Summit, the 2006 Time to Rise, and I want to tell you that it was an incredible performance by Tony Robbins and the team. And I'm sitting here on a boat cruise. My wife and I booked out a boat cruise, and straight after the event, I jumped onto a boat and we're out at sea for 4 days. And I've woken up in the middle of the morning at 3 a.m. and my mind was just going over and over. And this is something that tends to happen after attending a Tony Robbins event. The mind can click into hyperdrive if you let it. And if you allow your mind to kick into hyperdrive and you get the most out of it, then what you want to do is start journaling and writing down ideas, because it can be very empowering and powerful for yourself and for your future. That's what I've found in times past. In fact, after one seminar that I attended, my first UPW, I actually, on the plane ride home, wrote out my seminar that I run still today, which is Unlock Your Incredible Self. I came up with the ideas just on the plane as I was traveling back from that seminar, and I still run that seminar today, 12 years later. But I want to go through from a coaching perspective, from a performance perspective, from someone who's planning to perhaps become a coach or to become a teacher, trainer, or leader in the world of personal development. You want to understand these patterns that Tony used during the seminar. There's patterns that he used to build rapport. There's patterns that he used to get people in the palm of his hand so that they were primed and in a position where they were willing to make a purchase. And you want to look at all these things, because at the end of the day, everything that Tony does is a business. Tony genuinely cares. I believe that. Tony wants to help people and do it in a genuine way. I believe that. But ultimately, everything that he does is business. Because if you can't make what you do, coaching, profitable, then you don't have a business. You've got a hobby or a passion. And Tony has a business. So let's talk about what Tony does. The first thing that I want to talk about is frameworks. Tony's seminar, the 3-day summit, Time to Rise, was based on frameworks. And he introduced a number of those frameworks to us, things like the story, state, and strategy, the 3 S's of success. So he gave us that right up front. He talked about the Triad, physiology and focus, and also language and language patterns. So he talked about that right at the beginning. He talked about a number of other things like the hero's journey. He talked about how to break through to become more successful. There were steps involved. There's a strategy framework. So many frameworks that he gave us. And you can actually jump on the website that I created and you can go and have a quick reference to those frameworks. Even another framework was the 4 advisors. And he talked about the 4 advisors being the warrior, the magician, the lover, and the sovereign. So these frameworks were the basis of the content of his seminar. So the idea is, if you're going to share anything, there's got to be a framework involved. And right now, I've got a framework. I've actually come up with 10 points that Tony Robbins covered in his seminar. So I've created a framework out of Tony Robbins' event. So that's the way I'm delivering this, is a framework. So the first one is frameworks. Number 2 is he established himself as a credible leader. Now, how did Tony do that? Well, he said a number of times. He said he runs over 100 businesses. I think it was like 121 businesses. And they do several $1 billion in sales every year. And he runs all these companies and does all this. So the first thing he's doing is he's getting that credibility. He's establishing himself as a credible leader to all the people that are there, so that everybody can look up to him. Everybody can say, wow, look at how great he is. Look at how wonderful he is. He's setting himself up as that leader that we can trust and follow. So he's sharing his credentials, how many times he's done this seminar and how many years he's been doing this for and how many thousands, millions of people are here. So he's establishing himself as that credible leader. And that's the second point. And so if you think about yourself in the coaching realm and where you are, how do you do that? How do you establish yourself as the leader? So you've got to come up with things that you can say that put yourself in a position where people listen and are willing to take advice, are willing to buy into the material that you're sharing and what you're offering. Next is he was authentic with his emotional connection through stories. And this is something that everybody who attended that event would have seen and felt. was this genuine connection. So he's telling stories. He told stories about his life, about his past, about the abuse from his mother, many stories that he was telling. And I'll do a further breakdown in that in point 5. So there was an emotional connection there. There was pauses, there was tears, there was laughter, there was excitement. There was a plethora of emotions in the event, enough to let everybody there know and see that Tony lives a full and exciting, you could say, emotionally flexible life. And that's what was wanting to be portrayed there, is that Tony is able to go into one emotion, then another emotion, then another emotion, and he took us on somewhat of an emotional journey. And this is really powerful when you think about teaching and influencing others. You've got to take them on that emotional journey with you. Next is passion. It was evident from watching Tony and the way he reacted, interacted, and the way that he taught that he genuinely loves what he does. That he's not forcing himself to do this. He can get himself into state and he can show. Now, even though he's taught this seminar hundreds of times, and someone like me who's been back and back to see Tony time and time again, well, I've heard all of those stories. There was very few stories, if any, that I heard for the first time. They're all rehashed stories. And yet the emotion, the passion that he delivered them with was just as strong as if he was telling it for the first time or just had thought of it. Like, I haven't thought of this for years. And we get right into the passion of it. And so Tony has this ability to get himself passionately engaged with his content, even though he's taught it hundreds, if not thousands of times. So this is another skill that you want to learn from Tony. And I want to learn from Tony. We want to learn from Tony because he really is a master at teaching and training and influence. So the next is he follows the 4 core coaching principles. Now, this is a framework that there are 4 coaching principles that Tony follows, that other people in the profession follow. This is for coaches and trainers, this one specifically. So what are the 4 coaching principles? Number 1 is show up. Number 2 is build rapport. Number 3 is build energy. And number 4 is empower. So these are coaching principles that I follow in my coaching, and I know that other coaches follow it as well. They might not have the same framework or names for it, but it's the same thing. And I saw Tony do this beautifully, masterfully during the 3-day event. So the first one was to show up. Now, we were told that he was getting ready and priming on the side of the stage or in the same room. If you remember the host, there was a female host, Jolie, I think her name was, but she said, Tony's priming, he's getting ready right now to come out and see you. I can see how excited he is. So the idea is you've got to show up. If you're going to teach a seminar, teach a course, teach a webinar, if you're going to have a coaching call, then the first thing you need to do as a coach is you need to be prepared to show up for that person. Now, how do you show up? Well, you've got to be prepared to have emotional flexibility. So you've got to do what I call emotional stretching. And you've got to get yourself into a peak state, as Tony calls it, primed and ready to solve the person's problems. So that's really, really important. So showing up is something that Tony did. And Tony showed up each morning. When he showed up, he was in a peak state. When he showed up, he wasn't flat. He didn't start off, trying to ramp up. He went straight from a top peak state, which is good. It's not always the best approach if you're dealing with someone who's depressed or suicidal. But when you're dealing with a group of people, then Tony just overlooks all that and goes straight for excitement. And he builds energy straight away. Builds connection and rapport with those people that are already energized, and those people that aren't. Here's what he does. The next thing he does, so show up is number 1, he shows up with the emotional flexibility. Then what he does is he goes and builds rapport, and he gets everybody that's not at a peak state, or everybody that's not feeling the level of energy that he's pushing out. He wants to get all those people and grab them from where they are and bring them to him. He says, here's how I am. I'm excited. I'm happy. I'm enthusiastic. I want you here as well. Now, how does he do that? Really interesting what he does. So he does this through stories. And so if you think about it, there's a number of stories he gave, very relatable stories. So the first story was, he talked about a story where he had no money. He had the last $17 in his pocket, and he slapped it down in front of a young boy. Those of you who were there at the seminar, you remember that story. But he was talking about this idea that he had no money left. He didn't know where the next meal was going to come from. He'd gone and eaten this big meal, and it's almost like he was going to load up for the winter. So he's in a place of desperation. Now, everyone can relate to that. And this is a very relatable story. Now, he goes on to tell other stories. There was a story we talked about, a low point in his life, where he missed the bus home and he had to run 17 miles and there was anger and frustration. He says anger only gets you so far. And then what he did was he did these thoughts in his mind, never again, I've got to change, that type of thing. Then there was a relatable story about his first seminar where he had no money to pay for this seminar. And so he went and got a loan. He got a loan. That's just one of the workers on the cruise ship. He thought that he needed to say hello to me. But anyway, so you want a relatable story or a series of relatable stories. So he talked about this first seminar, how he went and got this loan, and he went to his first seminar because it was going to change his life. He talked about abuse from his mother. He talked about his father that left him. He talked about being homeless at one stage. That's after his mother chased him out with a knife. He talked about, there was no silver spoon in his mouth, that he had to work for everything that he got. And so he really did relate to every person in the room, because we've all gone through situations where we've felt that way. Now, whether those have been our economic realities or not, we've all felt those dark nights of the soul, the winter, as he puts it. And actually, that's another framework that he talked about, was the seasons. So we went over all these frameworks. So what he's done is he's built rapport with his audience. And he built a tremendous amount of rapport with everybody in that room, because everybody could relate. There are people in desperate situations right there. There are people in winter, as he said. And he was able to build rapport with all of those. The next thing he did was build energy. Now, this is really interesting. So the third part of coaching, if you remember, it's show up first, then build rapport, next build energy. Now, he had us do jumping exercises. He had us to create energy in our body while we're sitting. He had us say yes. He had us do a 4-advisor exercise where we've got that energy in our body through the 4 archetypes. Those 4 archetypes we went through, and I'll mention them again. They were the warrior, the magician, the lover, and the sovereign. And he was the example of this. He led out in energy. He jumped up and down. He was enthusiastic, and that led us into be enthusiastic. In fact, what a good leader does is they do in NLP what's called pacing and leading. So rapport, I'll just go over rapport. What is rapport? Rapport is trust and responsiveness. How do we get rapport? We get rapport through matching and mirroring. And what is the purpose of rapport? Well, the purpose of rapport is to pace and lead. And so this brings us to the third step, which I've already mentioned, which is build energy. So he's pacing and leading us to create more energy in our body and to get more enthusiastic about whatever it is that we desire in life. So the idea is building energy within us. So the warrior is about energy to attack. The magician is about that playful energy. The lover is about energy to love. And the sovereign is energy to lead. And so as he led us through those archetypes, it was all about building energy. And that energy was built in the first day, and it was re-emphasized and built again in day 2, and also re-emphasized in day 3. And so energy was all throughout the seminar. So if you think about it, he was doing those 3 things each day, showing up. So he was prepared himself. Then he was building rapport with us. He was telling stories, relatable stories that everybody could relate to. And then the next thing was he was building that energy. So as we go on from there, he also helped us build that energy towards our hopes, goals, and dreams, energy to create our brand and business. He talked about energy there. He talked about energy to love and be loved, energy to use the SO technique. And on day 2, there was a deep dive into relationships. And Tony talked about over-delivering, that if you're going to build a brand and build a name and do great, then you over-deliver. And Tony did just that. As he talked about the principle, then they over-delivered. Now, the original day 2 of the seminar was supposed to be 2.5 to 3 hours. Ended up going for longer than that. Ended up going for 4 hours. And so he over-delivered. He gave more than he was required to or needed to give. And this was to emphasize the point that he was teaching. And so he wasn't just giving it rhetoric, he was actually following through on what he was suggesting or saying. And so it gave a tremendous amount of energy and a tremendous amount of extra, you could say, information. And as I was going through Time to Rise in my particular group that I was in on Zoom, one of the members said, who had attended the Time to Rise Summit last year, said, oh, this part of it, which is the SO technique, he said that was only for VIP members last year, and now he's giving it for free. So tremendous value. He's wanting to add more, to give more, to do more. And so step 4 in coaching and the coaching principles is to empower. Now, how did Tony empower people? How did he empower others? Well, the way that he did this mostly through the session was, yes, he encouraged people to live their best life and he expressed that he had confidence in people and what they could do and what they could achieve. One of the ways that he did it, though, was to run testimonies of other people. He had people talk about their experiences. He had people talk about their breakthroughs and their transformations that had occurred through listening to his program and going through his various techniques, learning his frameworks and applying those frameworks. And so I had a number of people come on and say, oh, I came to a Tony Robbins event. Here's what happened. I went away from that. I was empowered. And because I was empowered, I took action and here's my result. And then another person came in, well, I went to Tony Robbins event. I was empowered. Tony showed up for me. He built rapport with me. I trusted him. Then after building rapport, he built my energy up and my belief in myself. And then I went out and I achieved results, and here are the results. And so a person will talk about those results that they got. And that's empowering for the rest of the group, because you think about it, when you hear other people's testimonies who have gone through an event and it's changed their life and it's had a transformational impact on them, then that is going to help you move. That's going to help you make that decision when it comes to time for him to sell his product or time for him to get you in as a customer, because that's his objective. His objective is to serve, yes, and to give. And he certainly spoke about that, and he talked about how he wanted to serve and give, freely to anybody, and whether they come along to the seminar or not. That wasn't his intent for doing this. And I get that. And yet at the end of the day, these events, and any event like this, they run and succeed because people sign up. And the way that it was structured and the way that he's, obviously the breakdown that I'm giving you now, you can see that it's clearly created in this way to increase and maximize conversion. And when you increase and maximize conversion, then you get more success. I've just got a couple of people walking down here and talking. So that's the idea. So those 4 steps again, I'll go over them once more. These are 4 coaching principles that everybody needs. The first one is to show up. The second is to build rapport. The third is to build energy. And the fourth one is to empower. You do those 4 things as a coach and you will be successful. You will be successful in this realm of coaching. And that's certainly how I've built my success. And how I'm running seminars today regularly is I do those 4 things. I show up myself. I make sure that I'm energized. I make sure that I'm in the right headspace. I make sure that I've got the right attitude. Then I make sure that I'm building rapport. I'm telling stories that are relatable to other people. People hear my story and they go, oh, wow, I can relate to that. And that's what you want, relatable stories, and ideally from your life, personal experience. And you can also draw on the experiences of others. So sometimes relatable stories can be, if you don't have a story about a specific issue or a specific teaching, then you can always go off and get somebody else's story and you can relate that and tell that story. So that does work as well. So there's also, when it comes to this, there was a second witness, and Dean Graciosi also got up and he shared as well, not only his personal transformation from Tony, but he was also there encouraging people, saying that his journey started with Tony, just like so many others, and he's in a position where he is today because of the impact that Tony Robbins have had, and more encouragement once again to go along to UPW, Unlimited Power Within, which I agree with, and I encourage everyone to go to that seminar. I'm actually a huge fan of Tony Robbins. I know not everybody loves him. In fact, there are some people that I've coached who really don't like Tony. He rubs them the wrong way. And that's why I say not every coach is for every person. You're going to relate to some people. You're not going to relate to everybody. And even Tony Robbins, as relatable as he is, as wonderful as he is, as the stories that he tells, and even as genuine as he is, it's still not going to relate to everybody. Some people are going to listen to it, think about it, and recognize and realize that it doesn't work. It doesn't sit right for them. And that's okay. And that's why, not everybody can coach everybody. That's just the reality of life. Now, Tony's worked on skills and the ability to coach a wide and vast number of people, but not everybody. Not everyone is going to relate to Tony. Like, for example, I know other coaches who there are people that absolutely love them, and, that high energy style doesn't work as well. And I've also heard people talk about, because I'm an Aussie, I'm from Australia, that Australian audiences do not respond as much to a Tony Robbins approach as they do to a more logical-based coaching approach. And so sometimes the high energy approach is not going to work for everybody. And that's just a reality of life. Now, I believe that anybody can benefit from it if you build enough rapport. And I believe that anybody could, get into that space if they get the amount of energy that, and they took the action, and they were able to allow them to get out of their own way. You've got to let the critical faculty in your brain step aside so you can allow the information to come into the unconscious mind, because regardless of the energy component, if that's off-putting for some people or for you, regardless of that, the frameworks are brilliant. The information is brilliant. Even the stories and the storytelling, the emotional connection, brilliantly done. Brilliantly done. Like Tony Robbins, I want you to know, is one of the best actors out there. He's an incredible actor. His ability to tap into the emotions of the past and to bring them up and to re-experience them. Because I know that Tony's done a lot of healing work. And because of the healing work that he's done, he doesn't feel those negative emotions from his past events. And yet he can still get himself into that emotion because he has the flexibility, the emotional flexibility to go there. And that really is a fantastic skill. And it's a skill that we can all practice, and certainly learn a lot from Tony in the practicing of that. I apologise, a little bit of background noise. That's I'm on a boat, and it's the middle of the night. It's now 4:50 a.m. and I've got some cleaners and some workers preparing for breakfast and other things on this boat cruise. So anyway, let's go to point number 6. So this 6 is the invitation. So the invitation was to attend UPW, Unlimited Power Within, which is a 4-day seminar run by Tony Robbins. Now this event was a couple of months away. We're looking at March, so probably about, about 9 weeks away. And so there was a big push and promotion to attend that live event or one of the other UPW's other live events. And there was a great price given, which is the same price on live, but what you got at this event was more inclusions. Now, one thing that they did really well was they had one offer. There was no confusion, a little bit of confusion about the inclusions in the offer, and they did their best to, on the third day, to make that more clear. In fact, Dean Graciosi came and explained the inclusions so that everybody understood it better. So what you've got is you've got an invitation that's clear, you've got one event, you've got 2 payment methods. You've got either you pay the full amount up front or you've got 2 payments over the next 2 months. Or pay today and then pay in a month's time, something along those lines. So the breakdown of inclusions. So what they did was they appealed to the emotional buyers first, which is excellent. This is the way to sell anything, is you look at emotional buyers first. And the emotional buyers are usually the first to buy. Emotional buyers are ready to buy, and day 2 they made the offer, and then day 3 they reinforced the offer. So day 1 was all about just giving. Let's give, let's serve. Day 2, the offer's there. The offer's there, and it wasn't overly pushed, which is great. What they did with the offer, though, they made it simple. They made it one decision. It's an event coming up. It's 4 days. Attend the event. Change your life. Click on the button. It was very, very simple, very, very clear. Now, at the end of day 2 and into day 3, we started looking at our logical buyers. Those are the ones that need to find out logically whether it makes sense to make the purchase. And so that was the next little buy. And then third, finally, was the scarcity and urgency. There wasn't a lot or a big push around scarcity and urgency, I noticed in the seminar, although you were told that if you don't act now, you will lose the inclusions. And so anybody who wanted the maximum benefit and all the inclusions and all the extras and all the help and all the support and Tony AI and all these wonderful things, then you've got to buy at the seminar, during the seminar, or within a short period thereafter. So that was the idea. You needed to get in to get the full extent of the exclusions. So there was a little bit of scarcity, a little bit of urgency. There was no seats filling up fast, because I think on Zoom it's pretty much unlimited. So they couldn't say only 7 seats remaining, and I know sometimes people use that as their scarcity and their urgency. So there's many things that they did do, and I didn't see a lot of that, the scarcity and urgency. So perhaps that's something that they could look at next time and think, well, how could we create a higher demand for people to take action immediately, like right now? Because that's the idea. If you really want to grow, you want people to take action immediately. The longer people delay, the more time they essentially have to talk themselves out of it. And so the idea is you want to get people to commit and to pay and to jump in. There wasn't also any talk that I really heard about the guarantee, like if you don't get what you pay for, you get your money back. So they didn't really push that at all. And I know a lot of people do that. If you pay today, there's a 30-day money back guarantee. I didn't hear any of that either, and that was interesting. I also noticed that after every call to action, that there was a 5 to 10 minute pause, and up on the screen you could see the offer, and there was a pause as people mulled over whether they would engage with that and whether they would take on the offer. All right, next. The next thing that Tony said, this was something that was interesting, and I didn't know whether to believe this or not, and I don't know whether I do, because if this is true, it's absolutely remarkable. But Tony made the comment that 70% of people have purchased. And what he's doing there is this is social proof. So social, and I don't know what number he was referring to, the 70%, but if he's getting 70% of the people, $1.2 million to sign up for his next program, then that's not just good, that's outstanding, and it's unheard of. Like in the coaching world, to have 70% of people book in for the event, if it's true, that exceeds all potential expectations. So anyway, that was something that I heard, and I just thought that was interesting. And I don't know what metric he was using for that. Maybe 70% of the people on Zoom. I don't know, 70% of a certain type of person. But as far as 70% of people, and I don't know whether I heard it right, so it might be me misinterpreting, but yeah, I sort of questioned that. And I thought, well, it's interesting, the idea of social proof, it's a nice one, but you don't want to make stuff up. You want to stick with the facts, honestly. And there was also more talk about the inclusion offer from Dean, and this is the invitation to go through it. So once again, look at those 3 things. Emotional buyers first, then you go to your logical buyers, and then you go for scarcity and urgency, and that is the best way to sell. That's the same thing as Russell Brunson teaches. If anyone knows of ClickFunnels, I'm a member of ClickFunnels, and that's the same thing that Russell Brunson has been teaching for years, is you've got to go through and hit those 3 markers. If you're going to sell anything, you've got to go through those 3 categories. All right, let's look at point number 7. Giveaways and gifts. Now, this was an interesting part of the seminar, and it certainly created a lot of happiness when we saw people receiving gifts. And so what Tony did was he gave people free access to the upcoming webinar, UPW, Unlimited Power Within. So no payment required, you've got a free seat, bang. And he gave a number of these away. And he also, there was a big finale, a trip to Fiji for somebody that somebody won. And also when those gifts were given away, and this is really interesting as well, is you've got to think about what your cameramen are doing behind the scene. So he's got a lot of people working behind the scene, and what they did was they zoomed out and they focused on the different people in the rooms, and you could see the smiles. The smiles were huge. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was happy. When gifts are given, it brings cheer. It brings happiness to the group. When we see something good happen, when somebody gets a break, when somebody gets a gift, then the person receiving the gift can feel joy. The person giving the gift can feel joy, and also anybody witnessing that gift being given can also experience that emotion. And so when he talked about the emotions all throughout the seminar, this just added to it. So these giveaways, the gifts, there was so free tickets to UPW, trip to Fiji, and other resources were given out as gifts, and this was wonderful. And also you felt like you were getting a gift. So if you paid for the ticket, and you got a gift with those inclusions, and everyone loves gifts. So that's number 7, giveaways and gifts. Number 8 is the music. Now realize that the music had a lot to do with the seminar. It assists with the emotion of stories. You would have noticed that when Tony was telling a story, there'd be this soft music in the background, especially when he gets to a heartfelt part. And that music in the background and the tears that Tony expresses as he's sharing the story. Once again, like I said, incredible acting ability that he's got. I mean, he's developed himself a lot in many different areas, including his acting ability. And this ability that he has to take people into the emotion of a story and revisit that event. And not saying that the tears are disingenuine. I believe they're genuine tears, that he's accessing the real stories and the real emotions. And that's what NLP training can do. You can revisit any state, any emotional state. And if it's a state of a breakdown, then yes, a person can revisit tears. It can actually happen. That's training, that's practice. And you can actually do that. You can share a story and be unemotional with the story. Or you can share a story and you can attach to the emotions of that story. Now, the reason I'm saying this is acting for Tony is that Tony's done an incredible amount of emotional clearing work in his life. He's gotten rid of those negative, less than positive emotions. He's gotten rid of those unwanted emotional connections to past traumas and past negative events. And yet, when required to, he can access them. So it's almost like a deliberate choice to access those emotions, to bring those emotions out and to show them and to share them with others. And it is really a wonderful skill and ability that Tony has, and it's a great acting ability. He's incredible at what he does. Play actors do this. When you think about actors getting into a role, actors will sometimes have to cry in a role for a part. Now, how do you do that? Well, you think about your dog that died. You poke yourself in the eye. You create a little bit of pain in your body. Well, you do this so that you can get into the emotion of a scene so that you can be that play actor, so that you can be that incredible world-class actor. So this is another skill that's incredible. The music helps. Music helped with the energizing, and music also helped with the emotion. And that was great. Now, also, number 9 was activity. Activity, this was not a passive seminar. There were certainly parts where we sat down and we wrote. Now, Tony kept the energy high throughout the seminar. There was not one dip in energy that I really noticed. He kept the energy high for the entirety of the seminar. And one of the ways that he did that was, first of all, he showed up himself. He got himself into a peak state, went out there and then delivered. And then the other thing that he did was he had other people move. And this is one thing that I like about Tony. If he feels or gets an inkling that his energy is dropping, he stops, gets up and says, let's move our body. And he gets up and gets everybody energized and excited. Now, what's that doing? Well, one, it's getting the room active, or it's getting the participants, because we're on Zoom and YouTube and other places, it's getting everyone active. And because we're all jumping, moving, getting active, our energy goes up, but also, and more importantly, his energy goes up. So now when he sits back down and starts talking, he's now back in that peak energy state. And so Tony's very, very good at doing that. Now, motion creates emotion. Now, the other reason that he's getting us up and moving is he knows that if we move, we create more emotion in our bodies, which means that his stories will have more impact. So it's very, very clever how it's all done, how it's all strung together, how it's put together in the sequence that it's done. Is that when you move your body, motion creates emotion. Now you're more prone to emotional responses or to reacting emotionally to stories. Then when he shares or delivers his story, now you're going to feel that to a greater degree. You connect, you build more rapport, or he builds more rapport with you. And so that's what's happening there, is that there's all of that happening in the background. So engaging in activity and movement to amplify emotions. That's the purpose of it. And number 10 was slides. He used slides. So the frameworks that he taught, and I talk about frameworks, that was point number 1. He was giving information away through the use of slides. He was putting these slides up. People could look at the slides, review the slides, go over them, write down, make notes, which many people did. And so the slides gave us those frameworks. And the beautiful thing about this webinar or seminar is that those were given out freely. Like in 3 days, we covered a lot of content. And in those 3 days, the content that was delivered was in some ways just as good as paid seminars that I've attended. I've gone and paid thousands of dollars for seminars. Now, the difference may be that when I pay $1,000 for a seminar, if I pay $1,000 and attend a seminar or a course, well, because I've invested my money, I'm now more invested in the course or the seminar. The challenge you've got with free events and giving away free information is that when people come along to those events, because there's no investment, because they've got no skin in the game, they don't invest in the material to the same degree. So I want you to know that the material was great. The audience may not have been as invested. And this is an interesting point and an interesting distinction. And I even noticed this with myself. I didn't pay to do the course. I went there and I did the course without that financial investment. And because there was not a financial investment in Time to Rise, there was times, especially when Dean Graciosi got up and started doing his thing, I started doing some work on the side. I had some emails I needed to send and I had some personal stuff to do. So I left the seminar. It was still playing in the background. My attention, my focus wasn't completely on the seminar. Why? Because I wasn't as invested. But if I'd paid $1,000 for those 3 mornings, if I'd paid $10,000 for those 3 mornings, then I would have hung off every word. I would have taken notes. I would have reviewed my notes. I'd still be reviewing my notes today. I'd be going over the replays. I'd be watching it over and over again. I'd probably watch it 10 times because I want to get my money's worth out of the event. Now, I hope that makes sense. So you invest and then you become invested. You get for free and you can take a little bit for granted. Now, Tony talked about that. He hinted on this during the seminar, is that when things become familiar, we take them for granted. When things are given freely, we can take them for granted. So he did mention this, and the idea is that when you invest, you become invested. And I want you to know that, I probably spent $20,000 plus with Tony, maybe about $30,000 doing Tony Robbins courses and programs, all up in my own personal development journey. I've spent around about $100,000 just on my personal development journey. And so the things that I was able to glean out of what Tony was teaching, the way he structured his 3-day event, well, it was beneficial for me, but I hope this is beneficial for you, that you look at this and think to yourself, if I'm going to structure an event, well, I want to have a look at 10 things. I'll go through them again. So first of all, work out your frameworks. Second, establish yourself as a leader. Write down what makes you credible. Third is authentic emotional connection through stories. So you've got to come up with 3 to 5 stories that is going to help you really connect with your audience. And think of what Tony does. He talks about times where he was down and out, times where he was sad, times where he was depressed, times when he was low, at a low point, times when he was broke or bankrupt. He talks about all of these situations. And sharing those helps him to build that tremendous amount of rapport. So frameworks, establish yourself as a leader, authentically, emotionally connect through stories. Next one's passion. If you genuinely love what you're doing, that will come through. So make sure if you're a coach, only be a coach if you love it. Otherwise, just pick something else and do what you love. Love what you do what you love. Next is follow the 4 coaching principles, which is show up, build rapport, build energy, and empower. Next is testimonies. Make sure that you've got some testimonies of others that people can read. Sometimes I tell those stories. In Tony's case, they went to videos of other people. They went to snapshots, recorded things that had already happened. And also the other thing was he created more of these testimonies during the event. And this was really cleverly done. I didn't even mention this, but more social proof and more empowerment occurred because of those lives that Tony encouraged everyone to share on the Facebook group with each other, encouraging each other, pushing each other. And then that becomes more fuel for him to empower people, saying, look how many people are already empowered. There's more empowered. And here we go. Next, invitation to attend. He had a very clear goal or outcome, and that was one offer. Make sure at the end of your program you have one offer. It's clear, it's concise, it's easy to follow, and an offer includes inclusions, not exclusions, inclusions. Offer includes inclusions. Next, giveaways. Consider giving giveaways if you want to model this successful event. Next is music. Consider your music. Play music at opportune times. If you've got a music or a sound person, then train them up so that they know what to do and when to do it at key moments to move the program forward. Next, activity. Instead of a passive event, have activities. If you can get people moving, motion creates emotion. You're going to connect with people deeper and better. Next is slides. Make sure that you've got all your content either on slides. In the old day, it was all about using the whiteboard and marking on the whiteboard, and sometimes I still use the whiteboard. In my teaching, I noticed with Tony, and I also noticed in the coaching world, and particularly on webinars, that a lot more people are going to slides. That slides has become the new norm, and that a lot of people are moving away from the old school clipboard or the old school board where you write things up on it, on the board. Now we're moving to slides because people can take snapshots. And the other thing is note writing is also changing, and a lot of people are now using AI to capture notes of meetings, courses, programs and trainings. And so the need for note writing, like it was 10 years ago, has completely shifted and changed. Now, some people still do the old school method of writing it out. And the good thing about writing it out is, well, it's going to stick within your mind longer. But if you have a snapshot of the slides, now you've actually got the training and you've got the memory of the content around the slide. And that'll be triggered by looking at the slide again. You look at the slide, you remember the training. You look at the slide, you remember the story. You look at the slide, you remember the emotion. You look at the slide, you remember the decision you made, where you were going to take action and change your life. So that is a breakdown of the Tony Robbins event. I hope you got a lot out of that. I certainly did get a lot out of, 1, going to the event, and 2, watching from a coaching perspective how masterful Tony is at running courses and programs. And so if this is of interest, just make sure that you subscribe to my channel. Let me know what other content you're interested in. Let me know what other coaching and what other things you noticed about the event. If you can write other things in the comment, it'd be great to hear that, to hear your ideas and your thoughts. This is just something that I sat down and just wrote up this morning, and I thought I'd share it with this group. So thanks very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And if you want to be successful and you are a coach, then do what successful people do. Follow a coach or mentor. One of the fastest ways to get from point A to point B is to get yourself a mentor. Get yourself a coach or a mentor. And I tell you what, there's no one that does it better in the coaching space than Tony Robbins. And he's got win after win to prove that, to show that he is still the alpha when it comes to coaching, teaching, and training. And he's certainly someone that I can learn from. And I'm going to take this information, I hope you do too, and improve upon what it is that I do and how I help people to grow, change, and evolve, and help people to live their best life. So my goal and Tony's goal is the same. My goal is to empower people to live their best life. That's what every coach's goal should be, is to empower others, to let people realize who they are. In fact, my catchphrase is, your commitment to yourself should be to discover who you really are. Unlock your incredible self and unleash that on the world. So do your very best to emulate these things in your coaching business, your coaching practice, in your life. If you're just a participant, if you're not wanting to be a coach or trainer, but you found this useful as well, just realize what's happening. And these things are all happening for most people below the surface, like they don't realize what's going on. But there's a lot of planning involved in running an event like this and moving the psychology of a person towards a sale. There is a lot of key components that have been added in, and I've just given you 10 here today, that move a person towards making that decision to purchase at an event like this. So it's really interesting looking into the psychology behind it and how to influence a person, how to influence anybody. And many of the people were influenced by this and this event. So have a great rest of your day. I've enjoyed sharing this. Like I said, once again, sorry about any background noise. That's part and parcel of where I am. I'm on board a ship. I'm actually on a ship. I'm out at sea at the moment. And my wife and I are enjoying a cruise together. She's sleeping in bed. And my mind was just ticking over. And so I had to jump up and give you this content and this breakdown of the Tony Robbins event from my perspective, and to show you what I learned as a coach and trainer, as a world-class life coach, what I learned and how I'm going to utilize that information to improve. Well, I didn't talk about how exactly I'm going to use it, but I am going to use that information to improve upon my offer, my services, and my ability and capacity to help people move forward. So thanks again. Thanks for tuning in, and jump on and listen to some of these other episodes in my podcast. You can also jump onto my YouTube channel and other places, and I look forward to seeing you again. And please come along to one of my free seminars and you'll see what I've learned. So have a great rest of your day, and bye for now.